What's up internet, Kevin here today bringing you guys a review of a game whose genre I've never really covered before on this channel, but it is a series that I've kept up with over the years, and that's the latest iteration of the Magic the Gathering video game, Magic 2015 Duels of the Planeswalkers. Now this is the fifth game in the Duels series, and for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, it's basically taking the Magic the Gathering card game and trying to make a slightly more simplified version of it for a video game form. Now, all the prior games in this series took out the issue of deck building for the most part. Players just got to choose between various pre-built decks, and as they used them, they could get additional cards to lightly customize them. But the idea was that each deck maintained its own unique flavor and playstyle. This really helped it feel to be like something a little different from just regularly playing Magic. There was this fun metagame going on with which deck you pick, whether or not it counters what your opponent chose, and if you're playing in a 2v2 match, trying to pick pre-built decks that complemented each other really well. Well, Magic 2015 has chosen to do things a little differently this time and has done away with this mechanic, but is instead treating this like playing just regular Magic the Gathering, but with a very isolated set of cards to choose from. You start the game off by choosing one of 10 decks, which are really just 5 different half decks put together in each way possible with just a couple little variations. And then you have to grind your way through the game's campaign to unlock more cards to further customize your deck or build entirely new ones. This approach comes with both its ups and downs. It's more different than it is straight up good or bad. On the one hand, you have more freedom to customize and build your own deck, which adds another layer of complexity to the gameplay. But at the same time, it feels like a lot of the cards don't have the same degree of flavor or consistent themes that we would see in previous versions. Basically, there's a little less style and flavor in exchange for more freedom. Now, the one weird thing they choose to do with this, though, is that they made sort of a half step, where they've opened up deck building, but have also restricted it in a really odd way, by limiting the number of cards you can have based on rarity. You'll only ever get 3 copies of an uncommon card, 2 of a rare, and 1 mythic rare, which just seems like an odd, incredibly arbitrary design decision. I could maybe see restricting the number of mythics, but even that's a stretch. Now, another big issue with this deck building approach is how it restricts your early on options for what you can use to handle certain opponents. Basically, once you pick your starter deck, that's all you have to work with for a good while until you take time defeating a lot of opponents to grind out more cards to choose from and actually maybe even build a new deck down the line. Until then, though, you're stuck with what you chose, and the problem with that is that you might find yourself in a situation where the deck you picked is just awful at handling a particular early on opponent. And there's nothing you can really do about it adjustment-wise because you don't have any other cards or decks to work with, really. Now, of course, you could just take the difficulty down to its lowest setting to deal with those situations, but that doesn't excuse the fact that something like this shouldn't happen in the first place, and is definitely one of the drawbacks of this new approach. So once again, the move to deck building from pre-built decks is something that's both good and bad in different ways, and really you can chalk it up mostly to personal preference. But there are some other problems in this version of Magic Duels of the Planeswalkers that we also need to cover, starting with its multiplayer. Multiplayer this time around has been extremely simplified, down to just 2, 3, or 4 player free-for-all, and that's it. Previous versions usually offered some kind of special game mode, some of which were good and some were bad, and consistently also offered other options for full 4 players, such as the 2v2 format known as Two-Headed Giant. None of these are present in the game, leaving simple, traditional free-for-all being the only multiplayer option, which to be fair, by itself is still really fun. But for being the 5th entry in a series, it's somewhat mind-boggling to me that this game features the fewest game modes. And I don't really see an obvious reason as to why, other than maybe a concern that the shift to deck building would affect the special game mode's balance. But it works with real cards too, so why not in this game? It's just a frustrating step back in content. Now, the other big issue with this one that the other ones didn't have as much is its approach to DLC. Now, earlier Duels of the Planeswalkers games did have DLC in the forms of expansions or specific decks you could purchase, but they all came out sometime down the line and usually didn't screw with the game balance that much. But this time around, they now have a unique set of premium cards that are available right away for purchase. Basically, there's a collection of cards you can use to further customize your deck that are only available via paid DLC. To make matters even more annoying, you can only gain these cards in the form of 10 card random booster packs that cost $2 a pop. So even if you just want one specific card, you have to keep buying packs hoping you get the right one. And if you end up wanting to unlock all the cards in order to have the game's actual complete collection, you'd have to buy a total of 14 premium packs, effectively boosting the game's total price from its initial $10 to $38. This also ends up creating a paywall content-wise, giving players that chose to pay more an advantage in multiplayer. So all in all, this is by no means my favorite entry in the Magic Duels with Planeswalkers series. Now, the change to deck building, like I said earlier, you could just chalk that up to personal preference. You might like it, you might dislike it, but the restrictions on deck building, the paywall content, and the lack of multiplayer modes just ends up souring the whole experience. At $10, it can still be worth picking up if you just want the latest iteration and need to kill time on an MTG-based game. But value-wise, you're definitely not getting what you used to in past titles, even when compared to those earlier ones that launched at $20. Well, that was my review of Magic 2015 Duels of the Planeswalkers. If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to let me know, as always, by hitting that thumbs up button. I always appreciate it. And if you're not a subscriber yet, then hit that button too, because I've got more great content planned and on the way. Don't forget, you can also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Kenson, where you can hear my up-to-date thoughts on what games I'm currently playing and what I might be reviewing soon in the future. I hope to see you guys soon with more great content, but until then, I'm Kevin Kenson. See you later.